IELTS General Writing Task 1. In this lesson we're going to look at how to write a formal letter. We're going to use the example that I showed you in the previous lesson. Here's the task. You recently organised a party for your company at a hotel. Write a letter to the hotel manager. In your letter, describe the party and how it went. Explain why you were pleased with the hotel's service and suggest some improvements that the hotel could make. And we said in the previous lesson that because we're writing to the hotel manager, this needs to be a formal letter. So we are going to start with "Dear Sir" or "Madam," and we're going to end with "Yours faithfully." We also looked in the previous lesson at having a purpose, a clear purpose at the beginning of the letter, and we could write that in this way: I am writing with regard to the party that, and we can continue with the purpose, just one sentence. We also talked about having 5 paragraphs, the purpose sentence, 3 points that you can see on the task, and an ending sentence, as well as the greeting at the beginning, "Dear Sir" or "Madam," and the "Yours faithfully" at the end. Now, we also talked about these 3 points. We need ideas for them, and we planned some ideas in the previous lesson. I said I was going to talk about the company's 20-year anniversary being thoroughly enjoyable. That was describing the party. And then explaining why I was pleased. The staff were welcoming and attentive. And suggesting improvements. I said the decorations and signs to find the room, improved signage. That was my quick plan, and you will have seen that in the first lesson about General Writing Task 1. Now we're going to use that plan, and I'll show you how I would write the full letter. Okay then, I've already said we should start with a beginning and a purpose sentence. The beginning is "Dear Sir" or "Madam," followed by a comma. Then we miss a line and write a 1-sentence paragraph about the purpose. I am writing with regard to the party that my company held at your hotel last weekend. I've used the verb held, which is a nice one to use with party. You can have a party, but you can also hold a party. After the beginning and purpose, we go on to the 3 points on the task card, and we'll do a paragraph for each. The first point was describe the party and how it went. Here's what I'm going to write. The event commemorated our company's 20th anniversary, and all 200 staff members from across the country were invited. I am pleased to say that everything went according to plan, and it was a thoroughly enjoyable and memorable evening. On to point number 2. Explain why you were pleased with the hotel's service. Here's what I'm going to write. We were particularly impressed by the hotel personnel on the night, including waiters, bar staff, and members of the events team. They were friendly, welcoming, and attentive, and they ensured that the party ran smoothly. That fully answers point number 2. I'll look at the vocabulary that I've used a bit later. There are some good phrases in there, but I'll look at that later in this lesson. Let's move now, though, to point 3. Suggest some improvements. Perhaps I could make 1 or 2 suggestions for future events. First, a little more care could have been taken with decorations in the events room. For example, it would have been nice to see more balloons. Second, a few people struggled to find the events room when they arrived, so you might consider improving your signage in the hotel. 2 quick suggestions there. I've said more care with the decorations. I've given an example of that with the balloons. And the second thing was more or improved signage in the hotel. So I've definitely fulfilled the requirements of point 3, suggesting improvements. Now I just need to end the letter with a final sentence and the ending. Here's what I would write. On behalf of all of my colleagues, I would like to thank you and your team for hosting such a special event. That's a nice formal final sentence to finish with on behalf of all of my colleagues, and then thanking the hotel manager. And then just the ending, yours faithfully, John Smith. I've invented a name to finish off the letter, and I recommend doing that. It just looks nicer if you finish with a name. That's the end of the letter then, and if you download the worksheet attached next to or below this video lesson, you can see the full letter, and there's a task for you to do on there related to vocabulary. We'll look at the vocabulary a bit later in this video. For now, let's look at how that letter would be scored. How are letters marked by the examiner? I looked at this in the first video lesson for General Training Task 1, and I said that there were four different scores, 4 criteria that the examiner uses: task achievement, coherence and cohesion, vocabulary and grammar. And I can tell you that the letter that you've just seen would be band 9 in everything, because task achievement, you need the purpose, you need the right tone, formal or informal, and you need to answer all of the points. And my letter that you've just seen did all of that very well. Then coherence and cohesion is clear paragraphs, a good flow of ideas that are nicely linked together. Definitely we had that. The vocabulary was appropriate, and there were some less common items of vocabulary in there, which I'll show you in a moment. And finally, the grammar was good because there were long and short sentences, and I avoided mistakes. There were no mistakes in the letter. So it would get a band 9 for all those 4 criteria. Now let's move on to looking at the less common vocabulary in that letter. This is probably the most important thing to ensure that you get a high score. And we're not talking about difficult vocabulary here. Difficult is the wrong word. We're looking for less common vocabulary, words or phrases that most people in the exam probably wouldn't use. That's what will impress the examiner. So what words or phrases did I use in my letter that most candidates in the IELTS exam wouldn't use? Let's have a look at them. The party that my company held. I mentioned that earlier in the lesson, using the verb hold to hold a party instead of just to have a party. It's a bit less common. Not many people would think to use that verb. The event commemorated. That word means the event was to remember something or to mark an occasion. It's a good word to use. Everything went according to plan. It's a nice phrase, went according to plan. A thoroughly memorable evening. We were particularly impressed by. Personnel, members of the events team. Welcoming and attentive. Ensured that the party ran smoothly. Care could have been taken with. It would have been nice to see. Struggled to find the events room. Consider improving your signage. And hosting such a special event. Now those aren't difficult phrases. There aren't many difficult words in there, but it's a bit less common. The examiner would be impressed by these phrases, definitely. And that's what helps to give my letter a high score, a band 9. Let's look at some more language items. Phrases for formal letters. Well, the beginning and ending first. If you use dear sir or madam, you need to end with yours faithfully. On the other hand, in some formal letters, you might have a name. You might invent a name for the beginning. Dear Mr. Smith, and then you have to end with yours sincerely. A couple of other things in terms of language. Let's look at some examples of first sentences stating the purpose of the letter, the purpose sentence near the beginning. Here are some examples that you could use. I am writing with regard to. I am writing to request or to ask for. I am writing to thank you for. I am writing to inform you that. I am writing to inform you of my decision to. I am writing to complain about. I'm writing to bring to your attention. So it depends what the letter's about, but there are some good phrases that you could begin with to state your purpose. Now let's go to the end, the final sentence ending in a formal way. Here are some possibilities. On behalf of all of my colleagues, I would like to thank you for. That's the phrase I used in this particular letter, but in different cases you could use thank you for your help and support. I look forward to receiving your response. I await your prompt response. Prompt means quick or fast. I hope that you will address these concerns as soon as possible. Please let me know if you require any further information. I hope that my request does not cause you any inconvenience. Of course, which one of these you choose will depend on the subject of the letter. If you're thanking someone, you can say thank you for your help and support. But if you've requested something, you might say I look forward to receiving your response. If you've complained about something, you might say I hope that you will address these concerns. So it depends what the letter's about. So be careful that you use the right type of ending according to the topic. Before we finish this lesson, just 3 more tips. First, avoid contractions in your formal letters. Write I am instead of I'm. You should also write do not instead of don't. Cannot instead of can't. Contractions like I'm, don't, can't are more informal. We'll use those in the informal letters, but for formal letters, we avoid them. Also avoid direct questions. It's much better to write a request like I would like instead of can I have. And finally, avoid exclamation marks. That seems a bit chatty if you use exclamation marks in your writing. We can do that in informal letters, but not in formal letters. That's the end of this lesson about formal letters. I will mention formal letters again in another video later when we compare some vocabulary for both types of letter. But for now, that's the end. You've seen a full letter written in a formal way with some good vocabulary and some good phrases. In the next lesson, we'll look at informal letters, the other main type.